Former U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to hand himself over to authorities in New York on Tuesday ahead of a court arraignment. On Thursday, a grand jury voted to indict him over hush money payments to a porn star while he was running for the White House in 2016. The indictment remains under seal, and the extent of the charges he will face as it relates to campaign finance violations and others remains unknown. But as Sherwin Bryce-Pease reports, the historic nature of the indictment and its political implications are reverberating across the United States.
Trump is the first former president in U.S. history to face criminal charges that comes as he remains the leading contender for the Republican nomination for the presidential election in 2024. The indictment will remain sealed until his first court appearance next week, when he'll be fingerprinted and photographed, but unlikely handcuffed, as some accommodations are likely to be made given his status and the unprecedented nature of it all.
Trump blasted the decision in a statement, calling it political persecution and election interference at the highest level in history, referring to the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg as a disgrace. But he reportedly faces more than 24 charges related to campaign finance violations and falsifying business records as it relates to hush money payments to two women in 2016. Stormy Daniels, who received $130,000, and Playboy model Karen McDougal, who received $150,000, both for their silence, ahead of defeating Hillary Clinton for the presidency in 2016.
This is a very, very big step and a big historic moment, but it's going to be many months, maybe even approximately a year before a trial, if there ever is one, would go forward. And so we are a long way away from Donald Trump actually suffering lasting consequences for his actions. But this is one of the first times in Donald Trump's entire life, much less political career, where there are some real potential consequences for his actions.
Republicans have quickly come to the former president's defense, labeling the indictment outrageous, divisive, and politically motivated. But experts argue this is about the law.
At this point, he is no longer going to be able to compete merely in the court of public opinion. Competing in actual court is a different thing. Spin won't matter. Facts will matter. The law will matter. And just as happened between Election Day in November of 2020 and the certification of the vote on January 6, 2021, in that in-between period, every single time the president took his election denial efforts to court, in court where facts and law actually mattered, he lost.
Security arrangements for his arrest and appearance in court in Lower Manhattan on Tuesday now at a premium, with the NYPD in concert with federal agencies mobilizing for potential unrest and, at the very least, a media circus, in a nation that remains divided on the man at the center of it all.
It's sickening. It breaks my heart that this great man, it just breaks my heart that he, his family, his staff, all of us, we have to go through this.
I feel relief. I think it's a dark part of our nation's history, and I do believe that illegal and criminal acts should be prosecuted regardless of whether or not you're a sitting or a former president.
Yeah, it's politics. I think they're just dying to find a way to keep him from being eligible for running for re-election.
While the Florida-based Trump is expected to hand himself over to New York authorities next week, Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis said he would not assist in any extradition request should one be received from New York.
And while this could add some additional theatre to the process, legal experts are clear that U.S. states, although enjoying a degree of sovereignty, cannot stop a warrant of arrest from being executed in another state, given that Americans are citizens of the same country, as politics and the law clash in a spectacle never before witnessed in the United States. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
All right, for more on this, we now cross live to SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So, after weeks of speculation around a possible criminal indictment, we finally do have some degree of clarity, although we still don't know the full extent of the charges that the former president will face, do we?
Precisely right, Simpiwe, because grand jury processes, judicial prosecutorial processes around the world, but particularly here in the United States, are secret affairs. And what you had was speculation fueled by the president tweeting that he was going to be arrested last week, Tuesday. Of course, that came and went because he didn't know what the grand jury was weighing at the time. And of course, that indictment, a vote in the grand jury came down late yesterday afternoon. And now we are hearing that President Trump will be arraigned. He will hand himself over to authorities in New York on Tuesday. His arraignment in Manhattan Supreme Court expected around 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time, which is around 8:15 p.m. Central African Time, which is South African Time. So Tuesday afternoon is the day when we will get greater clarity on specifically the charges he's facing. We are hearing reports from U.S. media that there are some 30 charges that the president will face, the former president, as it relates to campaign finance violations and issues around business fraud. But the details, of course, will be only revealed once that arraignment takes place on Tuesday, when the indictment, which has been filed in court, is opened by that judge for the first time. So still some speculation as we move towards Tuesday, but greater clarity around the timing of when we will know more. Simpiwe.
And we heard some reaction from the former president himself. So what more is he saying? What are his Republican allies saying in a move that's likely to be celebrated by Democrats, of course?
Well, you'll recall, of course, that former President Trump announced in November last year that he was running for the presidency, right? The election in 2024, announcing some 2 years earlier that he was going to seek the Republican nomination yet again. And so he is framing it in that context, calling this a political prosecution and election interference at the highest levels in United States history. He talks about that even before he was sworn in as president in 2017, the radical left Democrats, the enemy of the hardworking men and women of this country, have been engaged in a witch hunt to destroy the Make America Great Again movement. We've also heard some his allies, the current Speaker of the House, Republican Kevin McCarthy, talking about how this indictment has weaponized the sacred system of justice in the United States, referring to Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, as irreparably damaging the United States. Senator Rick Scott, the junior senator in the state of Florida, where Trump is at this moment, saying that this is a political vendetta against President Trump. Mike Pence, President Trump's vice president, called the indictment an outrage. But then, of course, you get different views from the other side of the aisle. Democrats like former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi tweeting last night, "No one is above the law and everyone has the right to a fair trial to prove their innocence." Hopefully, the former president will peacefully respect that system. Chuck Schumer, who's the leader of Democrats in the United States Senate, Donald Trump is subject to the same laws as every American. He will be able to avail himself of the legal system and a jury, not politics, to determine his fate according to the states, to the facts and the law, Simpiwe. So there will be no spin in court. This is going to be about the facts. This is going to be about the law. And this is something that Donald Trump is going to have to answer to before a jury and a judge.
Indeed, Sherwin. Now, let's talk a bit about the security arrangements for next week, shall we? And how we should expect this process to play out around the court precinct in Lower Manhattan next week.
A little bit of a circus, to be honest with you. I mean, just think about the media contingent that is already camped outside of court, Simpiwe. In addition to the fact, a number of unknowns. We don't know if there'll be a big crowd that turns out in support of the former president. Will there be a big crowd, basically celebrating his appearance in court? I mean, there are a lot of Democrats in Manhattan. This is blue country. And so one expects, either side of the aisle to come out in support of whatever position they have. But what we are hearing is that the NYPD has ordered all their officers in Manhattan, in New York, to show up for work in uniform. They've been told, officers have been cautioned to remain vigilant and maintain situational awareness, both inside courthouses and on the perimeters. So So a lot of unknowns here in terms of how the president will be brought into court. Will he be taken into the basement? Will he be taken into a side entrance? Will he do a perp walk in front of the cameras, right? I mean, this is Donald Trump. He will seek to leverage this moment for his own political gain. But then, of course, there are very fundamental things that will happen. He will be photographed. He will be fingerprinted. He will have to plea in front of a judge when this indictment is opened. And then we expect him to be released on his own recognizance. So there won't necessarily be a bail hearing. The president likely to be outside of court within 10 minutes, but still a process that will play itself out in front of the cameras of the world, and SABC News will certainly be there.
Indeed. All right, Sherwin, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. That was Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News correspondent in New York.